Cowboys versus Indians. What was the most feared weapon of the Indians, and what did the Indians fear about the Cowboys the most? Pox blankets and culling all their bison. Obviously not the pox blankets, as otherwise they know not to accept them. What was the most feared weapon of the Indians? The lever-action rifle. What people don't get is, by the end of the frontier, the remaining tribes had more modern weapons than Eastern Europe. White Americans defeated Indians through industrialization, Zerg rushes, and long-term tactics. The natives actually had a higher KD ratio against the white settlers for much of the westward expansion, but there were just way more whites to replace them, and whites were literally 2,000 years more advanced and had more mass production by the latter half. Contrary to what is fronted by a lot of the left, there were never a lot of natives in the entire northern two-thirds of the US. Most of those natives were pastoral or hunter-gatherers. Whites outnumbered them by 1800. Diseases killed off a lot more than combat. Only in the southwest were whites outnumbered until the last century, and those natives are actually still around. We don't really know how populated North America was, but it's estimated up to 90% of the population were killed by European diseases in some areas. Tribes started kidnapping children to raise as their own because numbers dropped so low. How many Indians actually died in combat against whites/Europeans? All the battles I've read about have been fairly small, and even the atrocities usually only involve a few hundred people, and are rarely as clear-cut as they're made out to be. Reality just seems to be a far cry from the wholesale slaughter that modern, biased historians painted it as. Many were forcibly displaced rather than killed. The Trail of Tears involved some 60,000 people. Unpopular opinion, but the Trail of Tears was the morally correct option. If Jackson let the Indians stay in Florida, they would have been slaughtered by settlers, not to mention the infighting and war amongst tribes. Moving them to the shittiest parts of Oklahoma let most of them live. The weapons that the Cowboys used were most efficient overall. Warfare has always been the same if one side has an obvious and overwhelming advantage. The other copies it as best they can. Britain invented tanks in 1916. Germany had them by 1918. The Indians couldn't make firearms, but went to great lengths to get them. The more exotic weapons sometimes get emphasized due to novelty. If you look at pick-related, the danger posed by an arrow is essentially the same as a musket or rifle. If it hits but is slower, it can be dodged. Has less penetration? I've read accounts of arrows being stopped by old wedges of cheese, besides wood and leather, and have a slower rate of fire. The exception would be the rarely poisoned arrow that could theoretically have a 100% fatality rate. The main utility of bows on the East Coast in the account I read from the 1700s was being able to hunt when foraging in close proximity to the enemy camp without alerting them. I imagine that sort of utility applied in the West as well. From an early period, their weapons were largely homogenized. Indians and cowboys both used trade axes and knives, often made in England. The main distinction was the bow, as we've discussed, and lances. US Lancer units didn't make much real use of them.